Alrighty, folks, welcome into the stream once again. The funny thing is, I have to come honest with you guys for a sec. I have to be honest and I have to be upfront. I live streamed yesterday. I did. None of the audio got picked up. That's on me. That's on me. I understand my faults. I understand what happened, but yeah, that's on me. That's on me. I apologize. But we move. We move to a more hopefully successful stream. Seems like the audio is picking up. And so let's begin. Let's stop wasting y'all's time and let's dive into the full graphic rundown here on today's show of You Don't Know Jack. All right, so on the chalkboard for this morning's show, we have Giannis Trade Rumors, followed by Yahoo's top 10 NFL QBs. I came across this article and I thought it would be an interesting discussion on what Yahoo thinks and their writers on the top NFL QBs currently. And there are some divisive names on that list, which will be interesting to talk about. Then some major news out of the NBA yesterday as the Lakers sold majority ownership. That brings up what I talked about a little bit in yesterday's show in the trade with Luka Doncic and the Mavs getting the first pick. This seems a little bit fishy. We'll read an article and we'll go over that. And then we'll preview the Game 6 of the NBA Finals on this evening. OKC has a chance to clinch it, but Indiana is on home turf and they have a chance to force a Game 7. We haven't had a Game 7 in the NBA Finals since 2016, which is just crazy to think about. We haven't had an NBA Finals Game 7 since 2016. Now, they're rare, right? You're not going to get them all the time. However, it's still interesting to think about. So let's dive into our first little thing about these Giannis trade rumors as I'm trying to figure out my mics or my camera situation. Let's take some time, let some people get into the stream as I'm figuring this all out. Let's see here. I just want to give myself some headroom, There we go. We got some headroom. See? All right. Let's dive in to this Giannis trade rumor. Because, obviously ESPN is going to be talking about this pretty much all the time. They're going to be talking trade rumors because it gets them clicks, right? Because you're going to get the fans of the team tune in, and you're also going to get other NBA fans that are a little bit weary of, could their team trade for a superstar like this? It's all up to really the teams. But let's see what ESPN has cooked up in terms of trades for Giannis. Let's look at this first one between the Milwaukee Bucks, Orlando Magic, and the Chicago Bulls. The Bucks would get Wendell Carter Jr., Ayo Dosunmu, Jet Howard. The Orlando Magic would get Pat Connaughton, Jalen Smith, Javon Carter, a first, and a first pick swap. And then the Chicago Bulls would get Kyle Kuzma, Andre Jackson Jr., and a 2031 second round pick. Now, I was looking at these last night, and so my thoughts may have changed as the night, has evolved. And so I think it's going to be a little bit tricky for the Bulls to make a trade like this. I don't know if they want to move off Ayo Dosunmu for a Kyle Kuzma. Now, they do get a good young defensive guy in Andre Jackson Jr. That's an interesting get for sure. However, I think, the Magic get too much and the Bucks don't get enough in this trade. If you're the Bucks, I think they're getting enough, but I don't know if this is enough to make them a super contender in the NBA. You look at the Magic, I don't know why they would trade for Pat Covington now. When did this article come out? It came out yesterday morning, so the Bane news with the Magic already was known at this point. So I don't know if they would want a guy like Pat Covington. Javon Carter, he's a vet, but they do get a first-round pick out of it. And they move off Wendell Carter Jr. He's been a decent center for them. Nothing crazy, but then they lose their depth. I know Jalen Smith, 6'9", 215. okay. I mean, okay. I can kind of get behind that in a sense. Um, but I don't know. It's a little tricky for me to really wrap my mind around that for the Milwaukee Bucks. Sorry, y'all. I'm just editing the stream. There we go. All right, so let's dive back into this more trade. Sorry, I'm still trying to get in the flow of today's show, but let's do it. All right, so let's go back. I think these other trades are way more juicy. We got the Milwaukee Bucks getting Cameron Johnson. Now, this isn't necessarily all Bucks trades. This is, do they shake it up, or do they make some trades and try to contend? Now, if I'm the Bucks, my moral stance for them would be just try to blow it up, especially with the Dame trade. Now, there's a Dame trade in this article that I will talk about because I'm actually very high on it. However, I think the Bucks are at a better spot to kind of blow it up, get some draft picks, get some young guys for Giannis. He's been great for them, and obviously Bucks fans may have a different sentiment because they want this guy to retire a Buck. And I would love for him to retire a Buck, especially rather than go to New York or even LA. However, if you would want the franchise to succeed in the long term, you're better off moving off Giannis now before he could eventually leave in free agency, which I wouldn't be shocked if he does because he doesn't, he's not necessarily super disloyal, causing a trade before his contract. It's like, hey, I played out my contract for you guys. I love the city. I want to go to a better franchise or a better contending team. That may be the case. So, but again, this first trade, it kind of boosts up Milwaukee a little bit, but nothing super crazy. They do lose out on Andre Jackson Jr., which is a nice young piece for them. But they get a guard in Ayo Dosunmu, which can help fill the void of Damian Lillard. Now, as we move on to this Cameron Johnson trade, I think this one's actually very interesting. But this is the Bucks fully going in, and I just don't think you can trade your first-round picks if you're the Bucks. I just don't think you can do that. They don't have a lot of picks to begin with. And so, if they were to do this, excuse me, I think they would need to get a better player than Cameron Johnson. Now, Cameron Johnson's a great player. We can look at his splits. I mean, last season he had 19 points, 4 rebounds, and 3.5 assists a game on 48% from the field. Not the craziest stats. He was on a bad Brooklyn team, but he's also 29 years old, so he's not the youngest cat out there. And so to trade 2 first-round picks when you're already depleted is kind of a stretch for me. So that's why I can't necessarily get behind that as much for the Bucks to make that trade, especially giving up those picks. Now we move on to the most interesting trade in this entire ESPN article. Bradley Beal, Royce O'Neal, and a 2025 first-round pick, number 29, would go to the Bucks. The Suns would get Pat Connaughton and Damian Lillard. I think this is a very interesting trade, right? As you see here, Lillard's on a $54 million salary, and he's obviously going to miss most, if not all, this upcoming season because of that injury. And that's a big cap hit. Well, if you're the Bucks and you're trying to contend, why not trade for a guy like Bradley Beal? Yes, he's had a down year. We can look at his splits. 17 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, 50% from the field. And this is as a third option. 17 points isn't terrible, but you could ask Suns fans and just real hardcore NBA fans on how they feel about this trade. I'm not super crazy about Bradley Beal, except I would love this trade for the Bucks because it keeps you in contending, or it keeps you as a contender, and who knows, maybe you eventually move off Bradley Beal at the deadline if you can somehow get off that contract. That's the big question, right? But I think the most important thing here, and especially why I think they should blow it up rather than stay back and contend, is because of the Damian Lillard injury. If Dame just sprained his ankle or something not to the extreme of an Achilles tear, then I could see the Bucks, kind of staying pat and kind of going, okay, he got injured. Let's get him back. Let's get some other pieces and let's build this team. But that's just not going to be the thing next season, and I don't think you want to waste a year of Giannis. Because then his trade value just keeps dwindling just a little bit before he's a free agent. And so I think this would be a great trade. Royce O'Neal is also a very nice player. He's a role player. He's 32 years old. He hasn't had the crazy. We can look at his game log, but you can see he's not a complete point scorer. but he was he was a great player out of Brooklyn. Went to Phoenix, and so I like that trade. And you get a first round pick, and you get a young guy. So I don't know why the Suns would necessarily do this for a Dame. Maybe they're hoping, okay, this is like a kind of a trade for next season rather than this upcoming season. I could totally see that if I'm the Suns. Right? We don't know what they're going to do with KD. Maybe they'd ride it out with KD. Maybe they trade KD and they're like, all right, we're going to tank this year. We have our assets from the KD trade. Let's see what we can do. So, especially for the Suns, you're kind of in no man's land. And if you can get off that Bradley Beal contract, I think that's a huge win. The Bucks, it's a risk taking on that contract for sure. However, I think this is a trade you have to make, especially getting off that Dame contract, especially because he's not going to play. He's not going to be really effective. Now, when we move to the Houston Rockets and the Milwaukee Bucks, this has been one of the bigger trade rumor teams this entire off season for both these teams. The Bucks would get Giannis and Pat Connaughton. The Bucks would get Alpert Sengun, Cam Whitmore, Reed Shepherd, Jack Lindell, one first, number 10, another first in 2027 via Phoenix, and a 2028 first round pick. This would be a great haul for the Bucks. Great haul. And I think for the Rockets, moving off a guy like Alpert Sengun, he's been kind of he's been your best player offensively. It might be hard to move off that guy. He's still fairly young at 22 years old. Look at his splits from last season. Double-double a game. I mean, the dude was great. But maybe they're just trying to shake it up. Now, you heard their coach, Udoka, kind of saying, "Oh, you can't trade all your whole team for one player. That's not how it works." So maybe they don't make this trade because he's so against it. However, I could totally see them making a trade for a guy like Giannis. This would be a great fit, I think, or a great trade for both teams. Yes, if you're the Rockets, you're giving up a lot, especially because you don't necessarily know if you trust Jalen Green at that point guard position. However, you're keeping a guy a vet like Fred VanVleet. Your team as a whole is still pretty solid. You keep Jabari Smith Jr., their third overall pick from a couple years ago. And so, yeah, you do lose some key players. They just drafted Cam Whitmore not too long ago. Reed Shepherd, I believe, was a rookie this season. And you move off 3 first-round picks. It is tough. But if you're the Rockets, I think now is your time to kind of strike and become a competitor in the West. Even though the West is as crazy as it is, I still like this trade for both teams, especially the Bucks. Now, this one's an interesting one. The Toronto Raptors would trade for Giannis. They would give up Scotty Barnes, Grady Dick, OG Ajabadi. That's just not how you say that. But then you would give up number 9, a 2029 first, and a 2031 first. Right? Giving up a number 9 pick, I want to say it was almost worth 2 first-round picks, just because it is a lottery pick. It's a top 10 pick. This would be a great trade for the Bucks. This is the type of trade I'm talking about, though, right? Yes, you could fully tank and go with get a star, but then get some young development players and picks. Absolutely do that. Or you can kind of do the middle road of that, get some proven players, some proven young players, and get some draft picks. This would be a great trade for the Bucks. I don't know if it's a great trade for the Toronto Raptors. You're trading your youth. Scotty Barnes, he's one of their more notable players. He's 23. Grady Dick, on the other hand, he just had his rookie season, I believe. And so this is kind of a weird move for the Toronto Raptors to make. I don't think they should make this move. I don't think they're in contending, they're not a contender, even if they make this trade in the East. Now, it is the East, though, right? And so he stays in the East. He stays in the easier conference. That could have some sway to it. But overall, this would be a great trade. This would be an A+ trade if I'm a Bucks fan. For the Toronto Raptors, I'd be like, this is probably like a B+ grade, just because you're trading for, a 30-year-old, and you're giving up your youth and your future a little bit. So now again, does Giannis stay there long term? That's only a question Giannis can answer. But then you give up a 29 and 31 first round picks, and that could be really bad, especially if Giannis leaves and then your team's just trash. So Moving on to the San Antonio Spurs, they would get Giannis. They give up Harrison Barnes, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sochan. They would give up the number 2 pick, 2026 first round pick, 2028 first round pick, 2030 first round pick, 2031 first round pick. No, that's a pick swap. They're kind of all pick swaps because it's like better of Dallas, Minnesota, and San Antonio, which is just interesting. I've never seen that before in a mock trade. But this would be a very solid move for the Spurs to make. You're giving up, your veteran players, nothing too crazy. Most of the draft capital, or most of this trade capital, relies on those draft picks. You're giving up 5 first-round picks, which is in a pick including the number 2 overall, which is just crazy to begin with. And so I don't know if I love this trade for the Spurs, but for the Bucks, again, this would be a great trade. You get off your player, you get some vets that you can potentially trade for second-round picks or even late firsts. And then you can build around a Dylan Harper with the 2nd overall pick and have Dame mentor him a little bit. Maybe you get Dame back and you have a deadly backcourt for a little bit. Or maybe then you eventually move off Dame in a trade to get some more first-round picks. Or, just get off that salary too. Would be a great thing for the Bucks. But for the Spurs, I think they're also in a weird spot with Victor Wembanyama. He's a top 10 player. He's young. With a Giannis, does Giannis fit, though? Exactly, And I would have to see it before I would, preach about it, saying, oh, it's going to work. I think the defense will be insane. But the offense, to me, is the big, like, eyebrow raiser. Can I trust Giannis offensively? Now, look, and that's crazy to say, but can I trust him to work in this offense? Right? Especially because you don't want to hurt the development of Victor Wembanyama by getting a guy like Giannis. I think that's the worst thing you can do to a young player like that. And so it would be an interesting mix. Definitely make them one of the more interesting teams in the West. I would definitely say if they were to make this trade, I could see them being around 7-6 seed coming to this next postseason. Just in terms of how whole the West is, I think that would be really their middle ground. I think their ceiling could be like a top 3 seed, but their bottom could be like 9-8 for sure if they make this trade. We got the Detroit Pistons, one of the more quiet teams in terms of this whole postseason. They're coming off one of their best seasons in a while. And they would get Giannis. They would give up Tobias Harris, Jaden Ivey, Isaiah Stewart, and 3 first-round picks. Again, this is the interesting thing because you have a guard in Cade Cunningham, first overall pick, young guy, really showed up in the playoffs. Do they make this trade? And does it hurt his growth as a guard? Again, that's an interesting take. However, I think this would be a great trade for the Pistons to make. You're giving up 3 first-round picks. Especially with how this team is trending, you would hope those are late first-round picks. You're giving up a good vet who played well this season, Tobias Harris. You're giving up a young player in Jaden Ivey, who averaged 17 points this year, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Only 23 years old. He was a 5th overall pick a couple of years ago in the draft. And then you give up a vet player in Isaiah Stewart, which he's been bouncing around. He's been a Detroit Piston, I feel like, forever. And so, this article brings up a good point, right? With the Celtics and the Cavs going in the second apron and most likely having to make trades and make their roster worse just because they're making it, they're expensive. And also Jason Tatum rehabbing his injury, this would be a great move, and I think the Pistons would be a top 3 seed in the West if they make this trade, or in the East if they make this trade. They get a guy like Giannis. They have a great guard in Cade Cunningham. They have good shooters. Malik Beasley, former Giannis teammate, they seem to get along just fine, teasing each other about the season, shaking their hips, whatever. And so I actually really like this trade for the Detroit Pistons more than the Bucks, actually. I don't know if the Bucks win, or I don't know if the Bucks win this draft or this trade because of those first-round picks and the trend that the Pistons are going in. Those might not be lottery picks, and you want lottery picks. You want to trade with a bad team to get those lottery picks. And you're really only getting one upside player, in my opinion, in Jaden Ivey, a young cat. He can score, right? But is that trade enough for your superstar, for your magnum opus? That is Giannis. I don't think so. And so I want to see the Bucks making this trade unless it was for some more recent first round picks or some other teams' first round picks if the Giannis have it. But I love this trade for the Pistons. Then this is a 4-team trade between the Golden State Warriors getting Giannis, the Lakers getting Daniel Gafford, Draymond Green, the Mavericks getting Gabe Vincent, a 31 at first, a 25 second, and the Bucks would get Austin Reeves, Brandon Podzinski, Jonathan Kuminga, Drace Jackson Davis, Maxi Kleber, a 2029 first, 2031 first, and a 2030 first pick swap. For the Bucks, you get a lot of young guys, which I think is great. You get some older player in Maxi Kleber, and then you get some first round picks and a pick swap. I don't hate that if I'm the Bucks necessarily. You only move off Giannis, and you get Austin Reeves, one of the best contracts that you can potentially trade for more first round picks. Brandon Podzinski, a young cat for the Warriors. Kuminga, who's shown flashes of being a really solid player in this league. Bench player in Jackson Davis, and a rotation player at best at Maxi Kleber. And so I think it's a tough trade for the Bucks to say no to in this scenario. But let's look at the other teams. You got the Mavericks getting Gabe Vincent, a shooter, a 31 first, and a 2025 second round pick. I don't know if they necessarily love this because they're looking for a point guard, not necessarily a guard. They're fine at the shooting guard position, so I don't think they make this trade for a guy like Gabe Vincent. They would do it potentially for an Austin Reeves, giving up Daniel Gafford. However, they do get a first-round pick back, and they get a second-round pick, and they can move off that first-round pick for a guard, and they can move off Gabe Vincent or whatever. So I don't hate this trade for the Mavs. I think there would be follow-up moves to this. But I think they would do it, especially if they're nervous about Daniel Gafford not re-signing, and that's where he goes to the Lakers. Lakers need big men. They get one in Daniel Gafford. The Draymond Green fit is a little weird with LeBron, just because I would struggle to see how they would share the floor together. Yes, LeBron can stretch the court, but Draymond Green doesn't really provide anything outside of defense and giving good screens. So that would be an interesting fit. And then obviously the Warriors getting Giannis. This is kind of like a panic move from the Warriors, I would think. You're moving off some of your younger guys. You're maybe pairing them up with Curry for a couple seasons at best, maybe 2, maybe 3 before Curry retires. If Curry retires, I should say. So they do have Jimmy Butler out there in Golden State. So you'd have a 3-headed monster in Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Giannis. I don't love it. Again, I would say this is the similar floor to currently what the Spurs are at. Kind of they would average maybe a 6, 7, 8 seed. Their peak would be a top 3 seed. Maybe I can't see them getting the first seed, but maybe like a 3 or a 4. And then their floor, I think they could be potentially like an 11 seed, as low as possible. Now it's worst case scenario, but for right now, the winner of this trade would be the Bucks. Second place would be the Lakers. Third would have to be the Warriors, and last place would have to be the Mavs, just in terms of how it all tunes out. So that'll do it for this mock trade scenario with Giannis on the move. It is, a pretty drastic trade for the Bucks to potentially maneuver. I've heard rumors of him wanting to stay. I've heard rumors of him looking to play in Texas or play for a big market. It'll be interesting to see where he goes. Damn, that took a while. We're already almost nearly at 30 minutes of today's show. But now we got another Yahoo article that I want to dissect. And it is about the top 10 NFL quarterbacks in the league today. And let's transition into this article. Now, it kind of splits it up into different tiers, right? So first off, you have the Patrick Mahomes tier, which is crazy glazed, and is number 1 Patrick Mahomes. And this is just, right, this is the top 10 NFL's top 10 QBs. There's a Patrick Mahomes tiers, and then there's 3 others. I think that's actually kind of crazy. I disagree with that. Now, if I had to pick a quarterback to be on my team, would I pick Patrick Mahomes? Probably. He's shown to be a winner, especially in the postseason. But to say he's in his own tier, I think is kind of crazy, right? You look at this. You might not have another 50 touchdown season. What? A 50 touchdown season is insane to have, and so for him to have, he's getting good PR based off his previous seasons, and no other quarterback would have that, right? Coming off, look at this intro, huh? Counting stats may have been down, yeah, because he wasn't playing well. Like again, the Chiefs were a dominant team throughout the regular season, right? And he deserves to be in this top tier. But just to say to Patrick Mahomes tier, and then especially follow him off with a guy like Lamar and Josh Allen. Yes, Lamar has his postseason, drops. Josh Allen's coming off his MVP, right? But to say that these guys are a full tier below Patrick Mahomes is crazy to me. Yeah, I think it's absolutely crazy. I think if you were to place Josh Allen on the Chiefs, there could be, similar success there. Lamar is just dynamic. I think there's more argument for Lamar being a tier down than Josh Allen, because Josh Allen is just he has all the things you want in a quarterback. Big, strong, can launch the ball, can run the ball. I mean, it's truly just deadly. And similar thing with Lamar. Lamar's not as big, as strong, but he's adversely as fast. And so it's just kind of shocking to me that they're a whole tier below. And then you have the ceiling raiser tier. Apparently, these are bona fide franchise quarterbacks who can significantly raise the ceiling of an offense. Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Matthew Stafford. Here's my thing about Justin Herbert and saying he's a ceiling raiser, right? Yes, they had a great season, but especially under Jim Harbaugh, it's been more of a running offense. You saw that in their first round pick in Hampton out of UNC. I would agree with Burrow and Stafford. Those guys can raise their offenses for sure. The Herbert thing, I don't want to sound like Emmanuel Acho here and saying he's a social media quarterback, but I'm a little bit more skeptical about Herbert than I am the other guys. And some guys are going to be like, well, his roster isn't as good. I'm like, okay, that's a fair argument. However, they're saying he's a ceiling raiser if we're debating this article specifically. So, to say he's above Matthew Stafford too is kind of crazy. They're just kind of saying that because he's young, and it feels like it's a very casual take to me that Justin Herbert is this guy. Now, he's a great talent. I would love him on my team if I didn't have my quarterback already, which we'll get into. However, I just don't see Justin Herbert being this young cat that everyone wants, right, over some other guys like a Joe. If you're talking about one season, would you rather have Matthew Stafford or Justin Herbert? I'd rather have Matthew Stafford. And that'll be a question as we move further down this article. Floor raiser, these are quarterbacks that are good, but just a hair off from the rest of the players ranked above them. You got Dak Prescott, Geno Smith, Jordan Love, C.J. Stroud. What a fall from grace C.J. Stroud's had in terms of the media. One down season can really just, lose all momentum you've had from your rookie season, because this guy was a top 5 quarterback going into last season, and now it's just completely changed. And so that's a little bit shocking. I think these are all accurate terms, but if you're telling me that Justin Herbert is a tier above a guy like Dak Prescott, I can't see it. I really just can't see it. I don't want to believe that that's true. I don't see that is true, in my opinion. Every time I feel like the Cowboys play the Chargers, Dak always plays better than Herbert, and so obviously you can't take head to head. But I would take Dak over Justin Herbert. I would probably take Justin Herbert over those other guys. C.J. Stroud is still a question mark. Obviously, I just said what a fall from grace from PR he had, but also I think he is due for a bounce back season. But there's just more tape of Justin Herbert, so that's why I would take Justin Herbert. Then let's look at, that's the end of the article because it's the top 10 quarterbacks. So if we take it as a whole from a straight ranking point without the tiers, you got 10 C.J. Stroud, 9 Jordan Love, 8 Geno Smith. I think that's fine. I think Jordan Love, this is a very solid top 10 list. Then you have Dak, Matthew Stafford, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow. I would flip Matthew Stafford over Justin Herbert and I would move Herbert with Dak and switch Dak and Matthew Stafford. So it would go Herbert, Dak, Matthew Stafford, then Joe Burrow. Then I would go Lamar, then Josh Allen, and then Mahomes. No, I would go Mahomes second. I would go Josh Allen one. I've just seen more consistent offense from Josh Allen and the Bills than I have the Chiefs. Now, again, it's they've made it to multiple Super Bowls. Yes, I get that. But if we're talking about if we want one quarterback to go into this season, I might take Josh Allen over Patrick Mahomes. Right now, now it's not like I'm taking Josh. What's that guy's name? Josh Rosen over Patrick Mahomes. No, I'm not. Right, but I think it's close. I think it's super close, but I think I would lean towards Josh Allen over Patrick Mahomes this upcoming season. And so that'll do it for this top 10 segment on these quarterbacks in the NFL. Obviously, training camp is just only a couple weeks away, I believe, from taking place. So I'm super excited about that. Then we got this Lakers new ownership. This is more just kind of a thinking about it. They sold the team. The deal valued the team at $10 billion, which is crazy. Jeannie Buss, who will retain a minority stake in the team, which they've owned in the family since '79, which is just crazy to think about. They've owned this team for so long, and they just up and sell it out of nowhere. Which is crazy. I would love to see how the Luka trade influenced the evaluation of this deal. Magic Johnson has praised it. And there's a big overall argument about this as well, on the whole basis. And there's a lot of team owners that are selling the teams right now. The Boston Celtics have done it. The Mavs have done it. And now the Lakers. And I wouldn't be shocked if more teams follow suit, especially with the media deal already being done. These teams are becoming expensive. Where you look at some of the Cavs are competitive, expensive. The Celtics are expensive. Now they got to trade. It was funny because they signed these guys to massive contracts, and then they sold the team. They sold the team after signing these guys to massive contracts. Now it's the new ownership's job to deal with this mayhem. Now, again, it's not crazy. It'll be super easy, I think, to move off them. It's just a real question of, can you get the adequate trade value? And so that's my big thing is, why are these owners selling their teams? Why? Why are they doing it? And I think it's to really cut costs. They see, hey, we may be not peaking in price because the price will always go up, but it's also like, are we going to stunt in growth, which is the real key? Because you don't just sell a team that you've owned for over 30 years. Or over 40 years. You don't do that, in my opinion. And there has to be other reasons. They're like, they must be thinking, you know what? We can make a lot of money with this. And I would somewhat agree with that, but there's also things where it's like, So, it's interesting. We'll have to wait for more dissection to come through, especially with the Luka deal. It looks even sketchier now. It just looks even sketchier now, which is really unfortunate. Let me gain my composure. Then we got NBA Finals Game 6 tonight. I talked about it on a little bit of yesterday's episode. Obviously, no one watched yesterday's episode. And so, with the NBA Finals coming up, I think this is potentially, a very interesting spot for the Pacers to, kind of come back a little bit. Tyrese Haliburton is doubtful for tonight. Miles Turner is, maybe the guy to step up for the Pacers tonight. Does SGA have a bounce back performance? And I say that after he came off a 31-point performance the other night. There's three big question marks though heading in tonight. So if you're taking note, here are my big three question marks for tonight's game. So for tonight's game, the first question is, can Jalen Williams have a repeat performance against the Pacers? Can he score at an elite level tonight? That's one of my questions. If he can, OKC will easily win tonight. If he can't, that leaves the door open for some of the Pacer players to potentially step up to the plate. My next question is who is going to step up to the plate for the Pacers? My money would be on Pascal Siakam. Maybe a Miles Turner. He's had a down season. He kind of needs a wake-up game. Or is it a guy like Andrew Nembhard? Or is it a guy like Andrew Nesmith? Right? Those are the questions I'm having going into tonight's game, where it's who's going to step up for the Pacers, right? You can say it has to be a collective effort. I think it really has to be led by one guy, and that one guy has to be Pascal Siakam. He's averaging 20 points a game this series off of 52% from the field. He's going to have to be the guy for them offensively to really get the engine running. And then finally, will the Pacers have this game, in control throughout, or will it be OKC, right? We saw against in game 5, we saw OKC had a lead and they really were in control throughout the game. Pacers were just keeping close. However, it was really OKC that was in control of that game. Pacers made it close, a 2-point game, and then OKC really just kind of closed the game out on a really solid note, especially heading into game 6. Will the Pacers be in control tonight? I think they don't have to. They have to make it more close than it was in game 5. However, I think OKC they notice, hey, if Tyrese ain't playing, we have a chance to attack this team and win tonight. Because if they force a game 7, anything can happen. Any player can step up. We've seen this numerous times in NBA history. And so if OKC wants to win the finals for sure, I think tonight is the night to do it. So, I'm really excited about tonight. We've been in a little bit of dry spell. The MLB games got rained out yesterday. So tonight will be a great night to really see some great basketball, hopefully. And so that'll make it towards the end of today's show. I'm still trying to figure all this stuff out. So thank you guys for watching this or joining the live stream. I really do appreciate it. We're going to make it better. We're going to keep working. We'll be live tomorrow at 10 a.m. Central or 11 a.m. Central, noon Eastern. So make sure you tune in. I will be, on the social medias. So, you know what? Let me get that over here. Let me copy that. Let me get out of this. Wait. Oh no, I just hit it. So make sure to follow the socials right here. Really, AJU Sports on X is where you'll find the most from me. I'll try to post on Instagram and TikTok equally. Those might be more video. Oh my gosh, what happened here? Scenarios, maybe some prop bets. You'll see if you follow. So make sure you follow the social medias below. Make sure you subscribe to this channel as well. I wanna get to 100 subscribers on this channel. That'd be sweet. So help me with that. Anyways, thank you guys for joining me for another episode of You Don't Know Jack. I'll be back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Central, noon Eastern. Have a great day, everybody.